Hi, welcome to the Aftermath Tales. Ready for a new story? Very well, let's begin.
I'm Kara Miller, 28 years old and married to Jonah for 3 years now. We live in a quiet suburban house with a mortgage we can comfortably afford thanks to Jonah's job as a regional manager. I work part-time as a cashier at the local grocery store. Jonah always says I don't need to work, that his salary covers everything, but I like having my own money. I like feeling like I contribute to our household, even if it's just paying for groceries and my personal expenses. It was a typical Tuesday evening when the doorbell rang. I just finished cleaning up after dinner and was settling in to watch some television. Through the peephole, I could see my sister Victoria bouncing 3-year-old Andy on her hip. Both of them looked frazzled and tired. "Victoria?" I opened the door quickly. "What's wrong? You look exhausted." "Kara, thank God you're home." Victoria stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, immediately setting Andy down. The little girl wrapped herself around my legs like she always did. "I need to ask you for the biggest favor, and I know it's completely last minute, but I'm absolutely desperate." I knelt down to Andy's level and smoothed her dark curls. She had Victoria's bright blue eyes, but there was something about her other features that always reminded me of someone else. I could never quite figure out who, though. She'd always been especially attached to me, calling me her favorite auntie even though I was her only aunt. "Hey there, sweetheart," I said softly. "Are you okay? You look tired, too." Andy nodded and buried her face against my shoulder. She was usually such a chatty little girl, so her quiet mood was concerning. Victoria ran both hands through her usually perfect blonde hair, leaving it even more disheveled. It was a gesture I remembered from our childhood whenever she was really stressed about something. "My boss called me an hour ago," Victoria began, her words coming out in a rush. "His father had a massive heart attack this afternoon. He has to fly out tonight to be with his family, which normally wouldn't be a problem, except we have this huge client presentation in Toronto on Thursday. 3 months of work, millions of dollars on the line, and I'm literally the only person who knows this project inside and out." "So you have to go to Canada," I said, standing up but keeping one hand on Andy's shoulder. "Tomorrow morning on the first flight out. I'll be gone 5 days, maybe 6 if there are complications with the deal or if they want me to stay for follow-up meetings." Victoria's voice cracked slightly with stress. "I've already called every babysitter I know, checked with 3 different daycares, even tried calling Mom, but you know she's in Florida helping Aunt Ruth recover from her hip surgery." I did remember. Our mother had planned to be gone for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer, depending on how Aunt Ruth was healing. "What about Andy's father?" I asked gently. It was a question I'd been asking for 3 years now, whenever Victoria found herself in a bind and needed help with childcare. Victoria's jaw tightened immediately, the same defensive reaction she always had whenever I brought up Andy's dad. "You know he's not in the picture, Kara. He never has been. It's just me and Andy, and that's how it's going to stay." I'd learned over the years not to push too hard on this topic. Victoria had gotten pregnant during what she described as a very difficult period in her life, and she'd made it clear from the beginning that the father wasn't someone who could or would be involved in raising Andy. I respected her privacy, even though I sometimes worried about her handling everything alone. "Of course I'll watch her," I said without hesitation. "You don't even need to ask. You know I love spending time with Andy." The relief that washed over Victoria's face was immediate and overwhelming. For a moment, I thought she might actually start crying. "Really? Oh my God, Kara, you're literally saving my life right now. If I don't make this presentation, if I let this client down because of a personal emergency, I could lose my job. And then what would I do? How would I support Andy?" "Hey," I said, reaching out to squeeze her arm. "We're family. This is what family does for each other. Besides," I looked down at Andy and smiled, "we always have fun together, don't we, sweetie?" Andy finally looked up and nodded, a small smile appearing on her face. "Can we make cookies, Aunt Kara? The kind with the chocolate chips?" "Absolutely. We'll make so many cookies you'll probably get sick of them." Victoria spent the next hour going over Andy's routine in detail. What time she usually ate breakfast, which foods she liked and didn't like, her nap schedule, her bedtime routine, which books she preferred for bedtime stories. She'd brought an overnight bag with clothes for the week, and Andy's most important possessions, her favorite stuffed rabbit and her elaborate dollhouse. The dollhouse was really something special, a 3-story Victorian mansion complete with tiny furniture, miniature rugs, and a whole family of small dolls. Victoria set it up in our living room while explaining how much Andy loved to play with it. "She can spend hours with this thing," Victoria said, arranging the tiny furniture carefully. "She has such an imagination. She creates these whole elaborate stories with the dolls, gives them names and personalities. It really keeps her occupied." When Jonah's key turned in the lock at 7:30, Andy immediately perked up with excitement. "Uncle Jonah," she squealed, abandoning her dollhouse and running toward the front door with her arms outstretched. I watched my husband's face as Andy reached him, and something strange happened. For just a moment, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, Jonah looked completely stunned. He stood frozen in the doorway with his briefcase in one hand and his jacket in the other, staring down at Andy as if he'd seen a ghost. Then she wrapped her little arms around his legs, and his expression shifted to something I couldn't quite read, something complicated and emotional that didn't quite make sense for the situation. "Hey there, little one," he said, and his voice sounded hoarse. He set down his things and picked her up, but I noticed his hands were trembling slightly. "What are you doing here? This is a nice surprise." "Victoria had a work emergency," I explained, walking over to them. "She has to fly to Canada tomorrow morning for some big client presentation. I'm going to watch Andy for the week." Jonah nodded, but he seemed distracted, his attention focused very intently on Andy's face. He was studying her features in a way that seemed almost familiar, like he was looking for something specific. "That's really nice," he murmured, and it sounded like he was talking more to himself than to me. "That's really, really nice. Are you feeling okay?" I asked, because he looked unusually pale. "You seem a bit off tonight." "Just tired," he said quickly, setting Andy down and ruffling her hair gently. "Long day at the office, lots of meetings." He looked at Andy again. "Have you been good for Aunt Kara today?" The rest of the evening passed normally enough. We had dinner together, spaghetti with meat sauce, which was one of Andy's favorites, and she chattered constantly between bites about her day at daycare, about a book Victoria had read to her the night before, about all the things she wanted to do during her stay with us. Jonah was quieter than usual, but I figured he was just tired from work. After dinner, I gave Andy a bath while Jonah cleaned up the kitchen. Then we all sat together in the living room while I read her a bedtime story. She fell asleep curled up between us on the couch, and Jonah carried her to the guest room while I got her pajamas ready. It wasn't until after Andy was tucked in and fast asleep that Jonah finally brought up what had been on his mind all evening. "I need to tell you something," Jonah said as I quietly closed the guest room door behind me. "About work." We walked back to the living room together, and I noticed he'd poured himself a glass of whiskey. That was unusual. Jonah rarely drank on weeknights, and when he did, it was usually just a beer with dinner. "What's going on?" I asked, settling onto the couch and tucking my legs under me. "You've been acting strange ever since you got home. Did something happen at the office?" Jonah remained standing by the window, looking out at our quiet suburban street. His shoulders were tense, and he kept running his free hand through his dark hair. "I got some news today," he said finally, turning to face me. "Remember how I've been working on that expansion project? The new branch office in Chicago?" I nodded. Jonah had been talking about the Chicago expansion for months. His company was opening a new regional office there, and he'd been heavily involved in the planning and preparation. Well, they've decided they want me to go there personally to oversee the opening. Make sure everything goes smoothly, troubleshoot any problems that come up, coordinate with the local staff. He sat down on the edge of the armchair across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "It's a really big responsibility, the kind of thing that could seriously advance my career if I handle it well." "Jonah, that's wonderful." I smiled at him genuinely. "I'm so proud of you. They obviously trust you a lot to give you this kind of opportunity." Thanks, he said, but something in his expression made me pause. He looked almost guilty. There is one complication, though. What kind of complication? I have to leave tomorrow morning. First flight to Chicago. He looked down at his hands. I'll be gone for at least a week, maybe longer if there are serious problems that need fixing. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. Tomorrow morning? But Jonah, that's exactly when Victoria is leaving for Canada. I just committed to watching Andy for the entire week. I know, he said quietly. I know the timing is really terrible, but this isn't the kind of opportunity I can turn down, Kara. Not if I want to move up in the company, not if I want to provide better for us. I felt a strange prickle of unease, though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. It's just such an incredible coincidence, I said slowly. Victoria gets called away on an emergency business trip to Canada, and on the exact same day, you get called away on a business trip to Chicago. What are the odds of that happening? Jonah's head snapped up, and his eyes met mine with an intensity that caught me off guard. It's not really an emergency on my end, he said, and there was a slight edge to his voice that I rarely heard. This Chicago thing has been in the works for weeks. I just didn't know until today that they wanted me to go there personally. But you never mentioned anything about having to travel, I pointed out. You talked about being involved in the planning process, but you never said anything about actually going to Chicago yourself. Because I didn't know, he repeated, his voice getting a bit sharper. Sometimes in business, things change quickly. Opportunities come up suddenly, and you have to be ready to grab them. The next morning came far too quickly. Jonah was up before dawn, moving quietly around our bedroom as he finished packing his suitcase. I lay in bed pretending to sleep, but actually watching him in the dim light that filtered through our curtains. That strange feeling of unease from the night before was still nagging at me, though I couldn't figure out exactly why. After Jonah left for the airport, I got Andy up and made us both breakfast. She seemed a bit confused about waking up in our guest room instead of her own bed at home, but she brightened up quickly when I reminded her about all the fun things we could do together during the week. Can we make those cookies today? She asked, swinging her legs from her chair at the kitchen table. Absolutely, right after we play for a while. We spent the morning in the living room with her dollhouse. I had to admit, Victoria was right about Andy's imagination. She was incredibly creative, coming up with elaborate scenarios for the tiny dolls, giving them detailed personalities and complex relationships. She moved them around the different rooms of the miniature house like she was directing a movie. This is the mommy, she announced, holding up a small blonde doll dressed in a blue outfit. And this is the daddy. She picked up a dark-haired male doll wearing a tiny business suit. They love each other very, very much. That's sweet, honey, I said, sitting down on the floor beside her. What are their names? Andy paused for a moment, thinking seriously. The mommy is Victoria, she said finally, and the daddy is Jonathan. I felt that strange prickle of unease again, stronger this time. Victoria and Jonathan. The names were so close to Victoria and Jonah that it couldn't be a coincidence, but children often used familiar names when they played, so maybe it didn't mean anything. And where do Victoria and Jonathan live? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. In this big, beautiful house, Andy said, moving the dolls through the elaborate rooms of the dollhouse. They have a little girl, and they're a very happy family. They go on trips together all the time, fun trips to exciting places. What kind of trips do they go on? Andy's whole face lit up with the memory of something wonderful. Oh, they went to Disneyland. It was so much fun. She bounced excitedly as she spoke. Uncle Jonah and Mommy and me, we all went together and we rode the teacups and the pirate ship, and Uncle Jonah bought me cotton candy that was bigger than my head. My coffee mug slipped from my suddenly nerveless fingers, hitting the hardwood floor with a sharp crack that echoed through the quiet house. Coffee splashed everywhere, soaking into the rug and splattering across the floor, but I barely noticed. I was staring at Andy, at her innocent, happy expression as she continued playing with her dolls. Wait, I said, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. What did you just say, sweetheart? We went to Disneyland, Andy repeated cheerfully. Uncle Jonah and Mommy and me, and Uncle Jonah bought me Mickey Mouse ears and we rode all the rides and... She moved the two adult dolls closer together and made exaggerated kissing sounds. And Uncle Jonah and Mommy kissed because they love each other so much. I sat completely frozen on the floor, coffee soaking through my jeans, while my 3-year-old niece continued to play house with dolls she'd named after my sister and my husband. She was acting out memories, real memories, of trips they'd taken together, trips where they'd behaved like a couple instead of the brother and sister-in-law they were supposed to be. The room seemed to tilt and spin around me as the implications crashed over me like a tsunami. The coincidental business trips that had seemed so unlikely. Jonah's strange behavior last night when he saw Andy. The way he'd studied her face so intently, like he was looking for something specific. The way his hands had shaken when he picked her up. And suddenly, with a clarity that was both devastating and undeniable, I knew exactly why Andy's features had always reminded me of someone I couldn't quite place. She looked like Jonah. I sat on the floor for what felt like hours, surrounded by spilled coffee and children's toys, while my entire world rearranged itself around this new, horrible truth. Andy continued playing with her dollhouse, completely oblivious to the bomb she'd just dropped into my life. She was making the dolls have conversations, moving them from room to room, creating innocent stories that were actually memories of a life I'd never known existed. My hands were shaking as I cleaned up the spilled coffee, my mind racing through every interaction I'd ever witnessed between Jonah and Andy, every family dinner where he'd been so natural with her, every time Victoria had brought her over and I'd watched them together without seeing what was right in front of me. I needed to know for sure. I needed proof. But first, I tried calling them both. Victoria's phone went straight to voicemail after one ring. Her cheerful recorded voice filled my ear. "Hi, you've reached Victoria. I can't take your call right now, but leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible." She was probably on the plane to Canada, or maybe she wasn't going to Canada at all. I tried Jonah next. His phone rang several times before going to voicemail as well. "You've reached Jonah Miller. Please leave a message, and I'll return your call as soon as possible." They were both unreachable. Both supposedly in different cities on separate business trips that were starting to feel like anything but business trips. With Andy still happily absorbed in her dollhouse, I went to our home office and started looking through our phone records. I'd never had any reason to examine them closely before. I'd always trusted Jonah completely with our finances and personal accounts. But now I was scanning the numbers with new eyes, looking for patterns I'd never noticed. There were calls to Victoria's number going back months. Long calls late at night after I'd gone to bed. Frequent calls during the day when I was at work. How had I never noticed Jonah staying up late, claiming he was working on his laptop when he was actually talking to my sister? I tried looking through our credit card statements too, searching for evidence of trips or expenses that Jonah had never mentioned. But everything looked normal. No mysterious hotel charges, no restaurants in cities he'd never told me about visiting. Either I was completely wrong about everything, or they were incredibly careful about covering their tracks. But I wasn't wrong. I could feel the truth of it in my bones, in the way all the strange little details suddenly made perfect sense. I needed more information, so I called Victoria's office. "Hartwell Marketing, this is Jessica speaking. How can I help you?" "Hi, Jessica, this is Kara, Victoria's sister." I tried to keep my voice steady and normal. "I'm trying to reach Victoria, but her phone is going straight to voicemail. There's been a family emergency." "Oh, no." Jessica's voice was immediately full of concern. "I hope everything's okay, but I have to say I'm a little confused. Isn't Victoria on vacation with you this week?" The words hit me like a physical blow. "I'm sorry, what?" "She took the whole week off for your family trip," Jessica continued, clearly puzzled by my reaction. "She was so excited about it when she left yesterday. She said it had been way too long since you and she and little Andy had spent some quality time together." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Family trip," I managed to say. "To Colorado, right? She even showed me some pictures of the cabin you guys rented. It looked absolutely beautiful, right up in the mountains with this amazing view. What was the name of the place?" Jessica paused, thinking. Pine Ridge Cabins, I think it was. Somewhere near Aspen. She said the three of you were going to do some hiking, maybe some fishing, just really disconnect from everything for a week. Right, I said weakly. Colorado, the cabin. I forgot something and wanted to ask her about it. Well, she did mention that the cell phone service might be pretty spotty up there in the mountains, Jessica said helpfully. I'm sure she'll call you back as soon as she can get a signal. I hung up the phone with hands that were trembling so badly I could barely press the buttons. Colorado. Victoria had told her office that she was going to Colorado with me and Andy for a family vacation. Not Canada for a business emergency, Colorado for a relaxing week in a mountain cabin. My heart was pounding as I called Jonah's office and asked to speak with Mike Patterson, who worked in Jonah's department. Mike and I had met several times at company parties and holiday events, and he'd always been friendly and easy to talk to. Hey, Kara? Mike's voice was warm and cheerful. Good to hear from you. What's up? Hi, Mike. I'm trying to reach Jonah, but I can't get through on his cell phone. Could you possibly transfer me to wherever he's staying in Chicago? I know he's there for the branch opening. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Chicago? Mike sounded confused. Kara, I think there might be some kind of misunderstanding. The Chicago branch opening isn't scheduled until next month, and Jonah's not on a business trip this week. He took vacation days. My vision started to blur around the edges. Vacation days? Yeah, he requested the whole week off months ago. I just assumed he was taking some time off to spend with you and your sister on that family trip you guys had planned. Family trip, I repeated numbly. To Colorado, right? He seemed really excited about it when he put in for the time off. Said something about wanting to get away from the city, spend some time in nature. I was actually kind of jealous. It sounded like it was going to be a great week. After I hung up, I sat in our home office, staring at the wall, trying to process what I'd just learned. Everything was a lie. The business trips, the timing, the emergencies. They had planned this together weeks or maybe even months in advance. They had coordinated their stories with their workplaces, telling everyone they were going on a family vacation to Colorado with me while telling me they were going on separate business trips to different states. They had arranged for me to babysit their daughter while they went off together on a romantic getaway. Their daughter. I looked toward the living room where Andy was still playing, still chattering softly to her dolls about families and love and happy trips to magical places. She wasn't just my niece. She was Jonah's daughter. My husband had been living a complete double life for who knows how long, having an affair with my sister, raising a child with her, while I remained totally and completely oblivious to all of it. I found Pine Ridge Cabins online and called them directly. Pine Ridge Cabins, this is Amanda speaking. How may I help you today? Hi, Amanda, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. I need to reach some guests who are staying with you this week. Victoria Bennett and Jonah Miller. There's been a family emergency. Oh my, Amanda said sympathetically. Let me check our guest registry for you. I could hear her typing on a keyboard. Yes, I do have them listed here. They're staying in Cabin 7, one of our more secluded properties. Let me transfer you directly to their room. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, someone picked up. Hello? It was Jonah's voice, and he sounded completely relaxed and casual. From somewhere in the background, I could hear another voice. Honey? Who is it? It was definitely Victoria. There was a pause. And I could practically feel Jonah's confusion through the phone line. Then Victoria's voice again, closer now and filled with concern. Who's that, honey? I took a deep breath, and when I spoke, my voice was deadly calm. Hello, Jonah. The silence that followed was so complete and absolute that for a moment I thought the call had been disconnected. Then I heard Jonah's sharp intake of breath, heard what sounded like him sitting down heavily, or maybe dropping something. Kara? He said finally, and his voice was barely above a whisper. I can explain. I cut him off before he could say another word. Come get your daughter, I said, my voice still eerily calm. I don't want to watch her anymore. And then I hung up. After hanging up, I sat there for a moment, then pulled out my phone and typed a message. I added both Victoria's and Jonah's numbers to the recipients, Can't wait to hear all about Canada and Chicago when you get back. I'm sure you both have amazing stories to share. Oh, and Andy told me the most interesting story about Disneyland today. I pressed send. The message showed as delivered to both numbers almost immediately. Back in their romantic mountain cabin 200 miles away, Jonah and Victoria stared at each other in complete horror. They'd been caught. After years of careful planning and meticulous lies, a 3-year-old child playing with dolls had brought their entire world crashing down. Victoria started crying immediately, huge sobbing gasps that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her chest. Jonah just sat there holding the phone, his face completely white. "She knows!" Victoria managed to say between sobs, "Oh God, Jonah, she knows everything." Their phones buzzed almost simultaneously. They looked down and saw they'd both received the same text message from me. "Can't wait to hear all about Canada and Chicago when you get back. I'm sure you both have amazing stories to share. Oh, and Andy told me the most interesting story about Disneyland today." "She sent the same message to both of us," Victoria whispered, staring at her phone. "She knows we're together." "The Disneyland comment," Jonah said hollowly. "Andy must have told her about our trip last month." They packed frantically, throwing clothes into suitcases without any care for organization. Their romantic week away had become a nightmare, and they had to get home immediately to try to salvage whatever they could from the wreckage of their lies. The drive back was the longest 4 hours of their lives. Meanwhile, I spent the afternoon trying to act normal for Andy's sake, while my entire world fell apart around me. She wanted to paint, so I set her up at the kitchen table with watercolors and tried to focus on her cheerful chatter about the picture she was creating. "It's my family," she announced proudly when she was finished. The painting showed 3 figures holding hands under a bright blue sky. A woman with yellow hair, a man with dark hair, and a little girl in the middle. "That's Mommy and Uncle Jonah and me at the park." I stared at the painting, at this innocent child's representation of her family. A family that didn't include me because I wasn't actually part of it. I was just the woman who sometimes watched her while her real parents were together. Every few minutes, I found myself studying Andy's face with completely new eyes. The dark hair that curled exactly the same way Jonah's did. The shape of her nose. The way she concentrated when she was working on something, with her tongue poking out slightly between her lips, exactly like Jonah did when he was focused on a difficult project at work. How had I never seen it before? How had I been so completely blind? But I knew how. I'd never looked because I'd never had any reason to suspect. I'd trusted completely, loved unconditionally, believed every lie they'd told me, because it had never occurred to me that the 2 people I loved most in the world would betray me so thoroughly. When I heard a car pull into our driveway just after 5 o'clock, my heart started racing. Andy heard it too, and immediately perked up with excitement. "Mommy," she squealed, running toward the front door. "She's back!" I caught her hand gently. "Let's wait and let them come to us, okay, sweetheart?" Through the front window, I could see both Victoria and Jonah getting out of his car. Victoria's face was red and swollen from crying. Jonah looked pale and exhausted. They moved toward the house like they were walking to their own execution. The front door opened, and Victoria called out tentatively, "Kara, we're home." Andy broke free from my grip and ran toward the entryway, her little feet pattering excitedly across the hardwood floor. "Mommy, I missed you so much. Did you have fun in Canada?" I heard Victoria's sob as she scooped Andy up, the sound of desperate relief mixed with overwhelming guilt. "I missed you too, baby. So much." "Uncle Jonah." Andy's voice was bright with pure joy. "I'm so happy you're home. Did you like Chicago?" There was a heavy pause before Jonah answered. "Yes, sweetheart," he said, and his voice sounded completely broken. "But I'm much happier to be home with you." They came into the living room slowly, their movements careful and hesitant. The tension in the air was so thick I could practically taste it. Andy immediately ran to show them the painting she'd made, bouncing excitedly between them. "Look what I painted today. It's you and Uncle Jonah and me. Aunt Kara said it was beautiful." Victoria stared down at the painting with tears streaming down her face. Jonah stood behind them, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, his face a mask of guilt and dread. "Can we all watch a movie together now?" Andy asked hopefully, looking around at all of us with bright, innocent eyes. All of us together? Like a real family? The word family seemed to hang in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Victoria covered her mouth with her hand to muffle another sob. Jonah's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. Actually, sweetie, I said, my voice carefully controlled, I think your mommy and Uncle Jonah need to talk to me about something important. Why don't you go play with your dollhouse for a little while? We'll watch a movie later. Okay. Andy skipped away happily, completely oblivious to the emotional catastrophe that was about to unfold in our kitchen. The three of us stood there in an awkward triangle, the weight of years of lies pressing down on all of us. Victoria was crying silently, tears streaming down her face without any sound. Jonah kept opening his mouth like he wanted to say something, then closing it again. Finally, I broke the silence. How long? I asked quietly. They looked at each other, and I saw years of secret communication pass between them in that single glance. They'd probably had conversations about this moment, had probably planned what they would say if they ever got caught. 3 months before your wedding, Victoria whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. The words hit me like I'd been punched in the stomach. I'd suspected it had started before our marriage, but hearing it confirmed made my knees feel weak. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter behind me for support. 3 months, I repeated slowly. So our entire marriage has been built on a lie. No, Jonah said desperately, stepping toward me. No, Kara, that's not true. I love you. I've always loved you. Do you? I turned to look at him directly, this man I'd thought I knew completely. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you love her. It looks like you've always loved her more than me. Jonah's face crumpled. I love you both, he said quietly. I know that doesn't make any sense. I know it doesn't make it right, but it's the truth. You love us both, I repeated, my voice getting harder. How convenient for you. Tell me something, Jonah. On our wedding day, when you were standing at the altar saying vows to me about love and faithfulness and honesty, were you thinking about her? Jonah closed his eyes like he was in physical pain. Yes, he whispered. The admission shattered something inside me that I didn't even know was still whole. I'd known it intellectually, had figured it out from the timeline, but hearing him actually say it out loud was devastating in a way I hadn't been prepared for. And you, I turned to face Victoria, my sister, the person I'd trusted more than anyone else in the world. How could you do this to me? How could you look me in the eye at my wedding, knowing what you'd done? Victoria was hyperventilating now, gasping for breath between sobs. I tried to stop it, she managed to say. I tried to end things before your wedding, but I couldn't. I loved him too much to let him go. You loved him too much, I said slowly. What about loving me? What about being my sister? I do love you, Victoria cried. You're my sister and I love you and I've hated myself every single day for what I've done to you. Have you? Because it didn't stop you from continuing the affair for 3 more years. It didn't stop you from getting pregnant and having his baby. Does she know? I asked Jonah, nodding toward the living room where we could hear Andy playing. Does she know you're her father? No, Victoria said quickly. She thinks you and Jonah are married, and I'm a single mother. She doesn't know anything about us. Except she does know, doesn't she? I looked back and forth between them. She told me about Disneyland today, about watching you two kiss. She painted a picture of her family, you, him, and her. Not me. I'm not in her picture of what a family looks like, because I'm not actually part of your family, am I? The silence stretched between us, broken only by the sound of Andy's cheerful voice in the living room as she made her dolls have conversations. I'm just the babysitter, I said finally. That's what I've been all along, isn't it? The convenient, free babysitter who loves your daughter without knowing she's yours, who watches her while you two go on romantic trips together. That's not true, Victoria protested weakly. Isn't it? Every time you brought her here for family dinners, every time you asked me to watch her, every time she called him Uncle Jonah and me Aunt Kara, what was that if not using me as free childcare while you two continued your affair? From the living room, Andy's voice called out sweetly, Aunt Kara, can I have more juice? I looked at Victoria and Jonah, these two people who had betrayed me so completely, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest, Get your daughter, I said quietly. Take her home, both of you. Kara, we need to talk about this more, Jonah said desperately. We need to figure out what happens now. What happens now is that you leave my house and you figure out how to explain to your daughter why Uncle Jonah won't be coming to family dinners anymore. I looked at Victoria. And you figure out how to tell our parents that their family is about to blow apart because you couldn't keep your hands off your sister's husband. Victoria's face went white. You're going to tell them? I'm not going to lie for you anymore. I'm done being the only honest person in this relationship. They gathered Andy's things while she chattered happily about her time with me, about the cookies we'd made and the pictures we'd painted. She hugged me goodbye with fierce affection, and I held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, knowing that everything was about to change for all of us. After they left, I stood in my empty house, surrounded by the remnants of our life together. Andy's juice cup on the kitchen table. Her painting of the family that didn't include me. The dollhouse in the living room with its perfect little family arranged in their perfect little rooms. I walked to the dollhouse and looked down at the dolls Andy had been playing with. The blonde mother doll, the dark-haired father doll, and the little girl doll, all arranged in the living room of their miniature house. A complete family. I picked up the father doll and held it in my hand for a moment. Then I walked to the kitchen and threw it in the trash. I couldn't stay in that house another minute. Every room held memories that were now poisoned with lies. I went upstairs and pulled out my old suitcase, the one I'd used before we got married, and started throwing clothes into it without caring about folding or organization. I just needed to get out. I was emptying my dresser drawers when I heard the front door open again. Kara? Victoria's voice called from downstairs, tentative and scared. She appeared in the doorway of what had been my bedroom and saw the suitcase. Her face went completely white. What are you doing? She asked. What does it look like I'm doing? I replied. You can't leave. This is your home. I stopped packing and turned to face her. My home? This house that my husband bought with money he should have been spending on his actual family? This bedroom where I've been sleeping alone while he was thinking about you? This isn't my home, Victoria. It never was. Kara, please. Victoria stepped into the room, her hands clasped in front of her like she was praying. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but please don't do this. We can work through this. We're sisters. No, I said flatly. We're not. Yes, we are. We're family. Family forgives each other. Family works through things. Family doesn't betray each other the way you betrayed me. Family doesn't lie for years and years. Family doesn't steal each other's husbands and have babies with them. Victoria was crying again, tears streaming down her face. I know what I did was wrong. I know it was terrible. But I love you, Kara. You're my sister, and I love you, and I can't lose you. You should have thought about that before you slept with my husband. I zipped up the suitcase and started toward the door. Victoria dropped to her knees beside the bed, literally begging now. Kara, please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything to make this right. I'll end things with Jonah. I'll move away. I'll do whatever you want. You'll end things with Jonah? I looked down at her. You have a child with him, Victoria. You can't just end things. And even if you could, it wouldn't matter. The damage is done. It's not too late. We can fix this, she replied, sobbing. No, we can't. Some things can't be fixed. Some betrayals are unforgivable, I replied. Victoria grabbed my arm as I walked past her. Please don't leave. Please don't give up on us. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then at her face, streaked with tears and desperate with panic. For just a moment, I remembered the sister I'd grown up with, the one who'd braided my hair and shared secrets with me, the one I'd called when Jonah proposed because I was so excited to share the news. But that sister was gone. That sister had been replaced by a woman who could look me in the eye while carrying on an affair with my husband, who could bring their child to my house and watch me love her without a word of truth. Let go of me, I said quietly. Kara, please, Victoria pleaded. Let go of me, I said. Victoria's hand fell away and I walked past her toward the stairs. She followed, still pleading. Where will you go? What will you do? You can't just leave everything behind. I can't stay in a house where I've been lied to for years, I said over my shoulder. I can't sleep in a bed next to a man who's been living a double life since before we were married. I was at the front door when I heard Jonah's key in the lock. He opened the door and stopped short when he saw me with my suitcase. Kara, what are you doing? Leaving. You can't leave. He stepped into the house, closing the door behind him. Where will you go? How will you support yourself? You only work part-time. You don't have enough money to live on your own. The words hit me like a slap. Even now, even after everything that had been revealed, he was trying to control me through money, trying to trap me with the financial dependence he'd encouraged. I'll figure it out, I said. Be realistic, Kara. You make barely enough to cover your car payment and personal expenses. You can't afford rent, utilities, groceries. You need me. I need you? I set down my suitcase and turned to face him fully. I need the man who's been lying to me for our entire relationship. I need the man who was thinking about my sister on our wedding day. I need the man who has a secret daughter he's been hiding from me for 3 years. That's not what I meant. I meant financially, practically. Right, financially. The way you've kept me financially dependent by encouraging me to work part-time. The way you've made sure I couldn't leave, even if I found out the truth. The pieces were falling into place now. That was intentional, wasn't it? Keeping me working just enough to feel independent, but not enough to actually be independent. Jonah's face flushed. I never. You did. You wanted me dependent on you so I couldn't leave. Well, guess what, Jonah? I'd rather be poor and honest than comfortable and deceived. I'd rather sleep on someone's couch than sleep next to a liar. Kara, please, be reasonable, Victoria said from behind me. You're upset right now, but you need to think this through. Don't make decisions you'll regret. I turned to look at her, this woman who had once been my sister, who was still trying to manipulate me even now. The only thing I regret, I said slowly, is trusting either of you. The only thing I regret is being so naive that I never suspected my own sister and my own husband were betraying me. But leaving? I won't regret that for a second. I picked up my suitcase and reached for the door handle. Kara, wait, Jonah said desperately. We have a life together, a marriage. You can't just throw that away. I turned back one last time. You threw it away the moment you touched my sister. You threw it away every day you lied to me. You threw it away every time you looked at your daughter and pretended she was just your niece. I looked at both of them, these two people who had shaped my world and then destroyed it. We never had a real marriage, Jonah. We never had a real family. It was all built on lies. I opened the door and stepped outside into the cool evening air. Behind me, I could hear Victoria sobbing and Jonah calling my name, but I didn't turn back. I got in my car, threw my suitcase in the passenger seat, and drove away from the house that had never really been my home. Away from the life that had never really been mine, toward whatever came next. In my rearview mirror, I could see them standing in the doorway, but I didn't slow down. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to salvage. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness, and some trust, once broken, could never be repaired. I drove toward the highway, toward the unknown, toward a future that was uncertain, but finally honest. And for the first time in years, despite everything I was leaving behind, I felt like I could breathe. 2 years later, I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex, a modest building in a part of town I'd never lived in before. My phone buzzed with a text from my supervisor at the accounting firm where I'd been working for the past year. Great job on the Maximilian audit. The partners were impressed. I smiled. I'd used my grocery store savings to take night classes in accounting, discovered I had a talent for numbers. Now, I made more than I ever had, enough to support myself completely. In my apartment, I opened my laptop and saw 2 emails in my inbox that made my stomach clench. One from Victoria, one from Jonah. I almost deleted them immediately, but something made me pause. Victoria's email was long and desperate. Kara, I know you probably won't read this, but I had to try. Andy asks about you constantly. She doesn't understand why Aunt Kara disappeared. Mom and Dad still babysit her sometimes, but things aren't the same. I've destroyed everything, haven't I? I miss my sister so much it hurts to breathe. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I had to tell you that I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Jonah's was shorter but somehow more painful. I don't expect you to respond. I just needed you to know that not a day goes by that I don't regret what I did. Andy asks about you all the time, and I see the confusion in her eyes when we can't give her answers. I destroyed the best thing in my life, and I'll live with that forever. I hope you're happy, Kara. You deserve happiness more than anyone. I deleted both emails and closed my laptop. That night, I thought about their emails, about Andy asking for me, about the family that had been shattered. But I'd learned something important over the past 2 years. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness, and that was okay. I didn't owe them my pain anymore. Across town, Jonah sat in his car outside the accounting building where he'd seen Kara the week before. He'd been driving by when he spotted her walking out, looking confident and professional in a way that made his heart ache. She'd looked happy, complete, like someone who'd found exactly where they belonged. He'd wanted to approach her, to say something, anything. But what could he possibly say? That he was sorry? That he thought about her every day? That marrying Victoria had shown him the devastating truth? That what he'd mistaken for love had really been nothing more than the intoxicating thrill of forbidden excitement? Victoria was beside him now, staring up at the building. Is this where she works? I think so, Jonah replied, still looking at the building. Maybe we could see her, Victoria said. No. Jonah's voice was firm. We've done enough damage. The truth was brutal and clear. He'd thrown away a genuine, loving marriage for what turned out to be an illusion. The secrecy, the stolen moments, the rush of almost getting caught, that's what had driven his feelings for Victoria. Not real love. Now, married to her, living openly together, the excitement was gone. What remained was just the ordinary reality of two people who'd built their relationship on lies and betrayal. He just stayed for his daughter, Andy. He thought about Kara constantly, her laugh, the way she'd trusted him completely. The life they could have had if he'd been honest. He'd destroyed something real and beautiful for something that was ultimately hollow. She'll never forgive us, will she? Victoria whispered. Would you? Jonah asked. If someone did to you what we did to her? Victoria started crying again, the hopeless tears that had become so familiar. My parents barely look at me the same way. They take Andy when I need help, but I can see the disappointment in their eyes. I destroyed our family for this. We both did, Jonah said quietly. We chose this. Victoria wiped her eyes. Do you think, maybe in time? No, Jonah said. And this time he wasn't trying to spare her feelings. Some things can't be fixed, Victoria. Some people, once you lose them, are lost forever. He started the car and drove away from the building, away from any possibility of seeing Kara again. It was better this way. She'd built a new life without them, and she deserved to keep it. Some mistakes were permanent, some consequences lasted forever, and some love, once destroyed, could never be rebuilt. That was the price of the choices they'd made. And finally, Jonah understood that some prices were too high to ever be worth paying.
If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Don't forget to follow for more content just like this. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.